Welcome back to Elm Elaborates. This is Season 2, Episode 15. We are here with Levi Hemingway. Levi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Ryan Bono. Appreciate it.
Yes, yeah. So we're going to talk about Macon, Georgia today. Macon storage, making it happen.
The
Levi,
Making of Macon,
that's right.
as it were.
You were the head maker of Macon. And so when I jumped on, we were probably 50 to 70% done. But yeah, I mean, you saw the project, before acquisition, after acquisition, saw it all the way through to the end. You actually flew there by yourself one time because we were having a little bit of trouble. So yeah, what was it like? Just run me through the very beginning. First time you saw the project, what was that like?
Yeah, so we bought a vacant Piggly Wiggly that had been sitting for 10 years with severely damaged roof trusses and literally shotgun shells through the side entry doors.
Yeah.
Like that's what we bought. That's the state that this project was in.
Why?
Yeah. Why is it? Yeah, great question. So this was a building, I mean, it was vacant for 10 years. So everything inside this building was stripped clean. Every bit of copper, wire, anything of value had been stripped clean. So our acquisition team found it, and it was actually listed for about $1.6 million. And he found the owner through some deep research and through some old tax records. And he called up the ownership group. It's a different development company. And right off the bat, he talks to the guy and he says, "Hey, I'm interested in your building." And he said, "Yeah, you can have it for $800,000.
Right off the bat?
Like first phone call. Drake called me. I was in Arizona. I was on a different trip, and he called me. He's like, "Hey, you know that building we were looking at in Macon, Georgia?" I was like, "Yeah." Like, any update? And he's like, "Yeah, I just got off the phone with owners, and they want $800,000 for it." So,
I think you alluded to why he wanted so little for such a big building.
yeah. So this is a big development group that owned this. That They did massive shopping centers. They did really, really big projects, and so they had acquired this years and years ago. Lease ran out with Piggly Wiggly. They were working on bigger projects at the time, so for them it was kind of the thing in their portfolio that was, their basis was so low that it wasn't really the biggest priority for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, right off the bat, we basically got a 50% discount on the purchase price. We know why. Our first site visit down there, we drove down, and the building was rough, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, like shotgun shells, like absolutely. The side door was completely plastered with like
bullet holes.
Yeah, with bullet holes. The place you felt like you walked into a Walking Dead scene, like ceiling tiles hanging down, graffiti on the walls, like. It was scary, honestly. We were a little bit scared to be there. We made sure to go there during the day, and even still, it was all dark inside. Like, all the walls, like all the doors were boarded up. So, like,
yeah, that building only has a small amount of storefront, very small amount, probably like 10 or 12 foot wide.
Yeah,
everything else around the whole thing is just block, right?
Well, if you think of a grocery store, like they typically have, there's no windows. They typically have the storefront in the front, and if all that's boarded in, like. There's no natural light in there. So we show up on site. It looks like a Walking Dead scene, or looks like a set from The Walking Dead, and it was like, okay, this is kind of crazy. But we really were looking at the market as a whole. We looked at the need for storage in the Macon market. We looked at the market rents. We did a lot of our due diligence on the storage side. We underwrote the building at $1.6 million, and then we basically had an $800,000 head start because of the new purchase price. So that's what attracted us to the project. Our first site visit, we spent 2 days down there. First day was walking the building, and I'll never forget, there was old offices like towards the front of the building. Like, you imagine a grocery store, and they had like the management offices like above. So we're walking through there with our phone flashlights. We had our architect there, an engineer there. And we're walking through it, and there was a black cat that just jumps out of this room.
Goodness.
And I'm telling you, we jumped out of our skin. Like, we walked, we're like, all right, we're done. We've seen enough. That was like towards the end of the site visit. And we just jumped out of our skin. It was the scariest thing ever. Like, we're walking through with flashlights, and it's just, picture a vacant building for 10 years, and then a black cat jumps out at you at your feet.
Yeah, no thank you.
Yeah, it was really scary. So first day we spent on site and really just looking at the building as a whole. And then the second day was driving around the market. We did some secret shopping for some other competitors. Tried to see, we typically, when we look at a site, we try to find some newer developments happening, maybe a multifamily project, maybe some retail, other storages. Like, we're trying to get a feel of what's happening in the market. Is there growth here?
Right.
We typically try to find like a new brewery, because that's usually a pretty good sign of like, breweries are kind of the new thing. And so, hey, if there's somebody just starting a microbrew, then it's like, okay. And then they see that, maybe the younger generation and
There was an amphitheater that was being built at the same time, right?
Yeah, so the old Macon Mall is just down the street from us there, and there was a big developer that came in and they completed the project, have since completed the project, and basically tried to revitalize the mall. And so they put this big outdoor amphitheater there. I forget how much the project was, but it was several $100 million project. You know?
Yeah, I remember driving by with you, and it was substantial. It was no small project.
Yeah, so we're looking for stuff like that when we're vetting the market. And then then back to the building, like, we're walking through the building, and my dad was actually the one who noticed in the back area, he looked up at the roof, and it looked like, the best description is, it looked like King Kong was on the roof, like beating the roof down, and like the roof trusses were completely mangled. Like, you're talking about steel roof trusses.
Yeah, that takes a lot of force.
I think they were 24 inches, maybe you remember.
Probably.
I think so they're massive steel trusses, bent. I mean, it looked like, they just looked like they were twisted.
Wow.
Yeah, so when my dad looks up and notices the trusses, from what we could gather, like later down the road, we've talked to some other neighbors, we think that there was a tornado that picked up a massive generator or piece of equipment from another property and landed it on the roof. And that weight and sheer force is what mangled the trusses.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what we've been told, yeah.
Right. Yeah, was there anything up on the roof when you went up?
Or King Kong was there.
Yeah.
No, nothing was on the roof. You go up there and it was like, what is it? What happened here?
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing on the roof. That's what was weird.
Wow.
We're expecting to walk up there and see this big hole and everything, and it's like, this looks fine.
Wow.
So, crazy. Wild. And so right off, we had our engineers there, luckily, and something like that can look really, really scary. And with the proper team in place, they quickly said, they looked at it and they're like, okay, well, I can see that they land on this wall here, so this is a structural wall. This wall's good. I can see they only span to here. Yeah. So if we were going to repair that, we could probably just replace this section. Right. It's still a challenge to get it done. Yeah. But having that team, having a structural engineer on site to say that makes us feel
way better.
Makes you feel better, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because you look at it and you're like, oh, all these possibilities. What am I going to have to do? It's like, no, it's just from here to here. You just remove them and put in new ones. It's not like you don't have to splice and cut and weld all this new stuff. It's like actually it's kind of plug and play if you get the right trusses. Yeah. Yeah,
we've really seen the value, especially at Macon there, we've really seen the value in having the right team early on these projects to really say because that works in reverse, right? What are we not seeing that's actually a bigger deal than we think? Or we see something we're like, oh, that should be pretty simple. And it's like, well, you've got to reinforce or you've got to do all this stuff. So
yeah. Perfect example is Goldsboro. We went there with a fire sprinkler contractor and we see fire sprinklers okay, great. And it's like, no, that's an 1.5 inch line. We might have to go to 2 inches. So those are the things that we would never know that, you know, you need somebody who specializes in that to take a look at something. And even if it looks perfectly good, it's like, hold on, if you're changing the use, X, Y, and Z. So yeah, definitely important to have the right team there early on in the project. So as far as those roof trusses are concerned, what was it like to source those, get those on site? How difficult was that?
It was brutal. It was a challenge. Yeah. So this was, I'm trying to remember the dates of it, but this is when everything was catching up from COVID. So building material was really scarce. I don't know if you remember all that. It was hard to get HVAC. It was hard to get electrical equipment and steel. It was hard to get steel. And so we started locally, started in Macon there, started calling steel suppliers. And we said, hey, look, we had our team out on site. This was after we bought the building. Yeah. So we had our team out on site and we're measuring them. The measurements had to be right on because we were ordering these custom made trusses. So we started locally, then we expanded to Georgia, anywhere in the Georgia state where we could find steel. And John Serva on our team was actually the one who sourced it through a steel supplier up in Maine.
Oh, wow.
So, tried to start locally, obviously to save shipping costs and see if there's, we talked to, steel plants. We talked to other GCs that we said, hey, do you guys have any extra, not do you have any extra, but we looked at modifying some existing ones. We found some that we could potentially use, but we'd have to get a welder and then we had to get a structural engineer because now we're modifying steel in the field.
And third-party inspections, we've done that.
And third-party inspections. And so that, we're kind of exploring that route because it was becoming apparent that it was going to be hard to source these trusses. Yeah. So we went down that. That was going to be even harder, we decided. So basically, long story short, we eventually sourced them out of Maine, got them on order as quick as we could because they were I forget the lead time, that probably about a 3-month lead time.
Wow.
And so there was several things in the build that couldn't happen until we repaired the roof.
That makes sense. Yeah.
We couldn't hang electrical there. We couldn't do HVAC. We couldn't put the new roof on.
Yeah.
So then anything we put inside, we're not watertight.
Yeah.
So it's like, we were really trying to get those on order as quick as we could, because as you know, like, you have one hiccup in construction and all of a sudden you can't paint, you can't do this or that.
Definitely domino effect. Yeah, that was before I was on the team. So
yeah.
I think as soon as I started, it was like those had just wrapped up. And I was like, oh, yeah, sounds pretty hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I actually had no idea what it took to get that done. So it's interesting to hear.
Yeah, it was a challenge. But, we always talk about, like, you learn more from the things that go wrong than that go right. For us, like, Macon was the first project that we did that was like 6.5 hours from our home base.
Yeah.
So we learned a lot about how do you manage a construction project 6.5 hours away. And really, in my mind, like, 6.5 hours is really no different than like 20 hours away.
Yeah.
Like, there are some differences there, but it's like long enough away that, like, you're not just going to pop down to the job on a Friday, right? Like, you have to plan your trip. You're going to have to make the time to do that.
Yeah.
And so we really had to get a lot of our systems in the works to manage and do projects farther outside of our footprint.
Yeah, that makes total sense. If it's 6 hours or 20 hours, you're just going to either take a flight or, it's like, yeah, you got to plan it out for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so you get the roof trusses fixed, and what else in that project kind of gave you a little hiccup or a hurdle?
So we had so I'll talk about the water leaks towards the end of the project, but one of the things that we did at this site was we were in the process of sourcing out a new steel supplier, and so we had met with Pro Steel, which is now our main supplier.
Yeah. And by steel, he means hallways and doors, like the actual storage
yes,
material.
not the steel trusses.
Yeah.
We had to find those out of Maine.
Yeah.
So we were in the process of trying to vet some new partnerships there, some strategic partnerships from the storage side, the doors and hallways. So going through that was, anytime you vet a new sub, there's always this worry that they're not going to perform, or, it's kind of like dating, right? You're kind of like, hey, how's this relationship going to work? Like, how are we going to communicate? How do you guys expect payment? How do you expect deposits, right? Like on a storage door and hallway line item on our budget, that's a huge number.
It's massive, yeah. How do you deliver? How many guys do you have to install? How long does it take you to install 10,000 square foot of storage?
Yeah. What does the punch list look like?
Right.
Like, what does the quality control look like? How many of your guys are there overseeing the installation of this, you know? Because a lot of the steel guys, they third party the installation. So how are we getting the product that we want? And so we were going through all of that. We were going through the dating phase there with Pro Steel, and just all of that back end that comes, sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, just get a new sub, get a new plumber, get a new steel guy, right?
I wish it was that easy.
As well as anybody, that it's a relationship that you have to build.
Especially some guys will tell you what you want to hear. And almost if you ask 5 questions and they answer them all textbook, you pretty much know that something's going on there. Yeah. Like if they're not being honest about something, either their price, their delivery, how many guys they have, or their office staff or something, if they're just like, yeah, we're the best at that, we're the best at this, or we're the best, those are the subs you got to look out for, to be honest. Yeah. Everybody has, it's construction. There's hiccups. There's problems. It's about how quickly can we solve them, and how much stress are we going to really impose on the project during the solving of that problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we had, last thing I just thought about that was, so the bank that we used to finance the project, they outsourced their construction inspections. And so they use a third party, and all this third party group does is they do inspections for banks, right? Yeah. So we submit a draw request, and this is before we streamlined our draw requests here at Outbuilders. Kyle and Ryan have cleaned that process up tenfold. So well done.
Thanks.
Because it was a mess when we were doing it. Let's be honest. And so anyway, so we put together a draw request, right? We send it to the bank, and then they contract this third party, and then they come out and they basically verify, okay, they're requesting 50% of the paint. Do they have 50% of this facility painted, right? Yes, no, whatever it is. So that third party inspector has been and will be I hope it will be the hardest third party inspector we have ever had to deal with.
Really?
Like, they pushed back on every single bank draw. They pushed back on every single line item. Every
line item?
Every line item. There was not a single, I mean, maybe one or two they let slide. And we're talking about like a $5,000 draw they'd let slide. But everything came back with comments, question, need verification on this. Did
you have to like revise the bank draw to reduce the percentage? Wow.
Every time. It was maddening. That was incredibly challenging.
We've had pushback, I think, twice. There was the paint line item one time where it was, we used 100% of the paint budget, but there was additional paint, so there was a change order that wasn't communicated. And I think one other time was maybe the roof progress. I can't even remember because it was solved very quickly. So, yeah, that must have been so frustrating. It's hard because when you need money to pay your subs, and there's only that 30-day grace period from when they invoice you from when you needed to get it from the bank.
Yeah.
30 days might sound like a lot, but it's really not at all. To do all this paperwork and requests and revise and that kind of stuff, man, that must have been pretty stressful.
Well, like we just talked about dating new subs, right? It's like we're trying to put our best foot forward because they're giving us good pricing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, guys, I'm waiting on a bank draw, that of course they're like, yeah, the GC's waiting on a bank draw. It's like, no, I'm truly been like, I can't get the money because I'm revising.
And just like you're dating subcontractors, you're dating a market.
Absolutely.
You don't know this market. You don't know how what's the standard. Like every section, there's a standard of operating procedures and payments, and people expect certain things in certain markets. And I remember Georgia, Macon specifically expected payment quickly.
Yeah.
There was the term net 30 was not bounced around there very much. It was like net 10. They wanted
net due on receipt.
Yes, net. I needed to be paid yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a lot of that going on in Macon, Georgia.
Yeah. So that added a lot of stress on the build side. Like you compound both of those things, right? We're trying to source steel trusses from Maine, right? Compounded with we're trying to vet a new steel supplier, and then we can't get the money to do it. And as we're in this new market, like we're vetting subs, and they're saying like, "Who's this Elm Builders? Like, where are you guys from?" Right? They're like, "Oh, we're from Wilmington. Like, trust us. We're gonna get you paid." They're like, "Yeah, like,
right.
We'll let you know," kind of a deal. So like, we are the new people in those markets when we go in there, and that is a challenge too. Which is why I think it's so important to build those really good relationships with subs that are willing to travel with us, because when we go into a new market, we might think we've got this great 100,000 square foot project that we can kind of attract the subs we want, but they're looking at us like, we don't know if we can trust Elm Builders, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's Elm Builders' track record like?
Exactly, and we don't know if we can trust the subs. So there's this kind of pushback where it's like we're both trying to feel each other out, and everybody's just trying to protect them and their family and their company.
Yeah.
And there was one subcontractor that did not work out.
Yeah. So you feel like you can always relive these things, and you can feel like, okay, did we vet this? Did I explain it right? Did I communicate clearly? But our electrician on that site was, we went through the whole vetting process, got multiple bids. This guy showed up, clean van, all that same
recommended,
kind of stuff. Top recommended by I think it was a building inspector.
It was a building inspector.
A building inspector was like,
that.
You need to hire this electrician. We're like, okay, great. That carries a lot of weight to us.
Right.
Because they see the work that this sub does, right? Like, they're inspecting the work that they do.
Yeah.
And so we take that, we take that very highly. Yeah, I mean, long story short, the sub, and it ended up going sideways. I think the sub got over-leveraged on a few other projects. And this happens too, right? Like, you have a sub that's growing their business. Like, we're a part of them growing their business. And so they took on a few projects at the same time. They didn't have the guys, the electricians to run the wire. So we basically had no electrician on site for, I want to say, like a month or 2 months when we needed him there.
Yeah. He was doing his job just at a very low performance level when I started. And so I was hearing these conversations, and then I kind of helped step in and help on some of the more legal docs, if you will. And with that being part of my background before, I was able to help kind of nudge them in the right direction as far as like, hey, you need to step up or you're gone. And it ended up being that they couldn't step up. They didn't have the guys. They were spread too thin, and they kept asking for money, and there was no performance there. They were far behind their schedule. And I think the way it ended was fine. You know, it ended up working out just fine. But yeah, we lost probably 4 to 6 weeks, and then we got a new electrician who, due to not knowing where the other electrician was at, they don't know where these wires are running. We had to write a labor contract essentially and a time and materials instead of a lump sum bid, which we love because then lump sum bids is like we know we're not going to exceed that unless we change something. So the time and material is not what we love to do, but in this circumstance we did, and it actually worked out all right. We liked that second electrician much better, and we felt way more comfortable with him. Yeah,
well, time and materials is just too easy to just just bill for,
I worked 48 hours last week.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
we absolutely like hey, you're bidding off the plans here. And that was absolutely a pivot we had to make. And, again, you go back, you relive some of those emails that were sent out during that time when it was kind of unraveling. And, we can always improve. But the flip side of that is, we did a lot of our pre-vetting. Like, this was highly recommended from a city inspector. So, like, even if you do all your things, there's still curveballs, right? Yes. And I don't know his business. I don't know. Maybe he had something personal go on in his life. Yeah. Like that happens. Like life happens. City storage Macon is not the biggest thing in this person's. It might not be, right? Like to me, it's an important project, but like who knows what he was going through in his personal life. And so we always try to look at that with grace and just say, hey, how can we learn? How can we do better next time? And then more importantly, how do we get the job done and open so we can start renting units?
Absolutely.
Like, let's get somebody in here to start testing wires and let's just get this thing going. Like, you can only talk about things for so much before it's like, we got to get somebody on site and pull some wire.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a roof problem with steel trusses. We had personnel problems, and then we had equipment problems. So from what I remember, there was a problem with the HVAC where the HVAC that was specified was not available. So we had to get whatever HVAC was available because, like you mentioned, the COVID impact was long lasting after COVID was
especially in construction.
Out of people's mind, it was still impacting. It kind of still is to this day. Electrical switchgear is still being impacted from this. There's been a huge lag. And just Kernersville.
And now there's tariff questions.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So it never ends. Yeah. But talk to me a little bit about the HVAC and sourcing that and switching it and, what ended up happening with the dehumidifiers.
Yeah, so same thing, like during this design phase, like we're trying to decide if we're using 3-phase power to the building or single-phase power.
Yeah.
And we've since created a better system of what we like to do. And so the site was originally designed for 3-phase. We couldn't get 3-phase equipment, so we said, look, we got to redesign this, which changed some of our transfer switch gear. But as a problem comes up, it's like, okay, we can't do 3-phase HVAC, so let's do single-phase. But before we bring that option, can we get the single-phase transformer? It's like, okay, we can get that. So it's sort of a puzzle we're trying to build. And so, we ended up having to source the HVAC, I believe, here in Wilmington. Stanley, our guy, came through for us, and he said, hey, look, I can get these things on order. I buy enough volume through, I forget the supplier's name, but he was able to get them.
Yeah.
So he got them, which was great, but we had to prepay for them. And remember the bank inspector I was telling you about? They did 0 deposits. They would not give us $1 for anything deposited.
Shoot.
So... here we are, right? We've got to buy this HVAC equipment because we need it. Like
I can feel your pain. I'm just listening to you. Like
so, like we had to purchase.
I don't know if they can understand, but I totally understand.
Like dollars are leaving the building, and it's like okay, great. Then we have a bank draw. And it's like, hey, great, we invoiced them for. We just wrote like here's the check stub. Here's how much we just wrote, and they're like,
paid for this.
We're not giving you money for that. And so we ended up so that was one where we fought them pretty hard because at that time, like it was expensive, right?
That's very expensive.
And we fought them. I called the bank. I called them. I was like, look, I need this deposit. I need this draw. So Stanley, we ended up having to get pictures of the units on a laydown yard in a place somewhere. I have them on my phone still. And basically the team came through and like they gave me enough pictures that I could convince the bank draw people to release the deposit that we'd already paid.
Yes.
It's like, what are we doing here, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand it somewhat from their perspective because they're lending out money and the equipment should be on site and either be on site or would they prefer permanently affixed to the building when they like to pay because then if there was any default, they actually have the equipment. They don't got to chase it down in a yard. Yeah, I get it. However, there's there's a certain leeway with, especially when you buy a building, you know, with a bunch of spread there, and we put down so much money on top of it, where it's like they are secured 10 times over. So it's like, help us, you know.
Well, the frustrating part for us was like, absolutely. On top of that, it's like, we guaranteed the note.
Yeah.
Like, we're the owners at Nomad when I'm wearing my Nomad shirt, right? Like, we're guaranteeing the note. But then we're requesting it from Elm Builders, our GC, which the bank, you know, you guys said you're okay with us GCing the project.
Yes.
So you're holding money to me, but I'm actually on the note of the money you're not releasing. Like, again, what are we doing here? So like, it's, you know, I won't keep beating that one. Like, it's just.
They don't look at the bigger picture. They have these rules and regulations, and then sometimes they don't want to flex those. And
so we actually, part of our lending checklist now is we absolutely ask lenders, point blank, do you use a third-party construction inspection? And if so, what's the name of that company? Absolutely. Because if we, like...
Do you remember the name of that company? You don't have to say it.
I do remember, absolutely. It's in our soft, it's in our emails of like, if they use this company, we are most likely going to really think hard about using that lender. Yeah. And we've said that to them, like straightforward, because it was so challenging. Yes. And like these projects alone are challenging enough. Construction is challenging enough. Yeah. Like you don't need to add anything. You add on, it just makes it that much harder.
Yeah, the paperwork and financial side, like when you walk on a job site, you don't see that part, but it's all that part is already so complicated. Shout out to Kyle, because he does all that stuff for Elm Builders. Like I couldn't imagine making it any harder than it already is. It's already so hard. Like anytime any invoice or credit or anything, we have to do this whole financial investigation, see where the dollars and cents went. And it's a lot of work, especially to get it right. And you need to get it right. You can't close out a project and have it off by a single cent. It's just not acceptable.
Yeah. Because it's like, how much do we make? I don't know. How much do we spend?
Yeah.
I think we're, we can't be
slippery slope.
We can't be in the ballpark game.
Yeah.
Right? From Nomad or Elm Builders. Like we are not in the business of ballparking things. We have to know our numbers. We have to know our strategy. Yeah. That's why investors invest with us, right? Yeah. Is they're investing with a team that should know their stuff. We can't really say, we think it's going to be this.
Yeah, especially when a project closes out. If a project closes out and you don't know what you spent on every line item, that's a problem.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. With sourcing the new HVAC equipment, right? Yep. The different specification for what was originally specified, like, were there any issues in that switching of equipment?
No, everything was perfectly fine.
I feel nothing like
at all happened. Nothing at all went wrong. It's like, what could go? Let's name this episode "What Could Go Wrong."
Yeah, it sounds so simple when we talk about it now, but like we were talking about before, it's a puzzle piece, and you're so fixated on fixing single phase, 3-phase. Where can we get the equipment? What supplier, carrier? Okay, what's their warranty? Is it the same warranty as we've been getting on this other one and this and that? So there was something that maybe slipped through.
So I'm joking. So during all of that HVAC change, 3-phase, single, everything you just said, our new equipment did not have the sufficient amount of dehumidification that we needed for that building.
In Macon, Georgia. It sounds like that's South. A climate that you would need
South,
that.
Right? Like humidity. So one of the main things for climate-controlled storage is you want to pull the humidity out of the air. Yeah. More than, like, people think climate-controlled, they think like 68 degrees when they walk in. Yeah. Or, they think it really comfortable. The biggest thing with climate-controlled storage is humidity control. Because moisture in the air causes things that are stacked on top of each other to mold, mildew, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. During that whole switch, we did not realize that our new equipment did not have enough dehumidification for the site. And I take full responsibility for that, because that was during that time where, there was a lot going on, right? Like we had to get this equipment ordered, and we did. So after we opened, about a year after we opened, we started noticing that it just felt more like moist in there than it did. It felt more like there was more humidity in there. And we're like, man, I wonder why. This should be fine, Looking at the specs, and we're like, no, we got it all good. And then our architect finally caught it, was like, no, like, you guys are looking at the specs on this. Like, we put in this, and that wasn't reflected on the as-built. Yeah. And so it was like,
because that's all we can get at the time.
Because that's all we could get at the time, because we're trying to, we're dealing with so many other factors. And then you throw on top of that, like, we can't get the money from the bank, like we've already talked about. Like, it was just so it was an oversight. It was a miss. And so anyways, we ended up having to go back, we just did last year, and we added some additional dehumidifiers to the site, which was, you helped with that.
Yeah, it wasn't very hard.
It wasn't very hard, so we had to run electrical, right? We had to run some plugs.
Dedicated circuits, and then we put the dehumidifiers by the door and then in four corners and kind of pipe them to the exterior. Wasn't very hard. Didn't cost a ton of money.
No, but it was just, it was like, okay.
It was needed.
It was needed, yeah.
All right, so Macon had a bunch of challenges, but I want to talk about some of the good stuff.
Yep.
I know right off the bat, Pro Steel knocked it out of the park.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk about that for just a second?
Yeah. Yeah, they came through fantastic. I mean, they were absolutely on site, great communication. They just absolutely knocked that one out of the park. That was our first project with them, so I think they were trying to impress us.
Yeah, and they did.
I think they were doing a little bit of that. They sent maybe an extra couple of guys because I think they realized that there's a good relationship there, and it worked. We're still using them to this day. So,
so storage hallways and doors went great. What else went pretty good?
So overall, like every challenge we just talked about, like internally in the office, there's several people on our team that think that Macon is our prettiest conversion that we've done yet.
Yeah.
And that changes as we bring new projects on and we sharpen ourselves and get better at things. But it turned out incredible. Like from the Mansford in the front, we've got amazing downlighting. Like we've done some great pictures of it. We use it on a lot of our marketing material because it looks that good.
Yeah, the ceilings are all painted.
Yeah, we went with black ceilings, really amazing. Tall. It just, from what it went to, like we use that marketing material across the board because it is truly the two side by sides where you're like, wow, I can't believe this is the same building.
Yeah.
So even with all that, like the paint turned out great, the units turned out great, the flow of the site turned out really good. We worked through that. We had to do 2 gates. Our loading turned out great. We spent a lot of time thinking through that. What's the customer experience?
Yeah.
And so there was so many things that, at the end of the project, when you open it up and you look at it, you're like, okay.
Wow. Yeah.
That's the problem though. You ask yourself like, was it that hard?
Yeah.
Let's do another one.
Yeah. Oh, that was totally worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
you forget about all that hardship that you just went through.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, it just turned out incredible. And the last issue, not to keep going to issues, but we turned the fire sprinkler system off at Macon early on in the project.
Yeah.
And as we turned it back on towards the end, it sprung a few leaks. So we had to repair a fire hydrant and a water main coming into it.
Yes.
So like Macon truly chased us through the whole project with having to solve problems and issues all the way throughout. And then you still look at it now and you're like, man, that looks really good.
I would argue that even after we got CO, we still had a massive challenge.
Yeah.
Third-party management.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So we ended up working away from third-party management here at Nomad City Storage and Elm Builders. Yep. It's all the same roof, but we love control because
we're control freaks.
Yeah, I mean, we can hold people accountable. Yeah. I think that's what it comes down to. It's like if we have a standard and you're third-partying it, it's hard to enforce our standard on everybody else. They have their own process and procedures, and it's hard for us to step in and kind of do that kind of stuff. And I remember getting a video of the office just trying to figure out what the layout is, and then I see a couple of ceiling tiles with stains on them, and I was like, "Hey,
is that
wet in 2 locations?" And it's like, yeah, it's like okay.
And we'd gotten a few people that a few tenants that said, "Hey, there's I'm having some mold issues," and that should be the first red flag. But when we're not in that position where we're managing it, we weren't hearing those.
Yes.
We weren't hearing that directly from our asset manager, and so we had some unhappy tenants, but we didn't know about it, and so we didn't know to fix the problem. So
exactly, you can't fix a problem that you don't know exists.
Yeah, it's since been taken care of thanks to the team, and humidity's all under control there. So
perfect.
Yeah.
So it's just that kind of stuff. It's like, why wouldn't you tell us about that?
Yeah.
Like that's like, this is our pride and joy, blood, sweat, and tears that went into this building. Like we can't just let it have leaks and can't let it just get deteriorated, So yeah, I can definitely see that Macon was a challenge.
We jokingly say we're control freaks, right? But really what it comes down to is we're going to roll up our sleeves and solve the problem.
Yes.
Right? Like that is what it means in our minds. That's the control freakness is like, hey, there's an issue here, like, and that goes to like, are you a passive or are you active? Like we're very active in this building, right? From the GC, from the management, from the, finding deals. Last week, our acquisition team drove up just to meet a potential seller. Like went up because he was, didn't like to use email for this stuff. And Drake's, he's like, I'm on my way. Like, spend half the day, like, we're active people. So I think that the term control freak really comes to like, we're going to put our boots on, we're going to roll up our sleeves, and we're going to solve this issue to the best of our ability.
Right. Like,
however,
one of our core values is whatever it takes. Yeah. And whatever it takes is not ignoring a leak or ignoring any problem in front of your face and looking the other way. That's just not really how we do it.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be a challenge to find out who we have to send down there and coordinate and all that, but I'd rather do that, you know? And that's just our whole team believes that. And I think that's a really powerful thing when you have a whole group of people that says, no, we can roll up our sleeves and we can figure this out.
Yeah.
And then you take that a step further and you say, okay, how do we automate this? How do we create a system for this? And then how do we streamline this to where now we don't have to solve that problem every time? I think that's the last piece that people, when they think of them doing everything, they're like, okay, I'm going to have to solve this problem every time.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to deal with this every time. It's like, you can build the system for that. You can build the team for that. And so,
absolutely.
We want to roll up our sleeves and get in there and fix the problem.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Yeah. Macon was quite the challenge. A lot of people say it's like, you don't really learn that much when things go right. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like, in retrospect, now that we look back, it's easier to say it now, but there was a lot of lessons learned.
Yeah.
There really was. And I think that's what makes a strong team. Like when you can get through that stuff and then you take on the next project and then it really wasn't as hard as that one. And then, some things get easier. You're still going to have challenges and stuff, but I think hard projects make great teams, and I think that was part of that. Thanks for joining and watching this episode, Season 2, Episode 15, Making Macon, with my co-host here, Levi Hemingway. We appreciate you watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See ya.